Cool. You have a podcast. Me too. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Cool. You have a podcast. We're back. I've got another episode for you. I got a fun episode for you. If you were ever wondering what it's like to be a Generation Z, I got someone in store for you. I got a 20-year-old college student from San Diego, a good friend of mine, Colin on today. And we're just going to discuss what it's like to be a part of the Generation Z, what the differences are between Millennials and Generation Z, and really what are they thinking compared to us. There are a lot of differences. We've been able to statistically see what direction Millennials are going, but we don't really understand what direction Generation Z is going. So we're going to talk about all that stuff today, and like I said, a fun podcast. If you like this content, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to whether you're listening or whether you're watching on YouTube. Go ahead and hit that like button. Share this with your friends. The more shares I get, the more the overlords over at Google and YouTube and everywhere else can see that we're worthwhile and we're worth listening to and watching. So do appreciate that, and yeah. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Cool. You have a podcast. Me too. Colin, thank you for joining me today. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's great to join you. I'm very excited.
Awesome. Well, I already let our guests know that you are a Generation Z. So you were born in 2000?
2000. Yep.
Okay.
One of the first.
Right. So Generation Z is 2000 to now 2020. So I think the oldest one is 20 years old, right? And you are 20 years old, right? Or turning 20.
I turned 20 in November. Yeah.
Okay, dude, that's crazy. So there's a lot of interesting speculation. There's a lot of opinions on Generation Z, but it's the same as, like, I kind of see it as, it's the same way Generation X or baby boomers kind of see millennials, like where it's the me generation. We're all about technology and not about hard work. And there's a lot of, opinions about us. But I think that over the past 30-ish years, 36 years, we've been able to like study millennials, see what they're good at, see what kind of industries they're going into, how we view politics, how we view religion and family and all that kind of stuff. There's so many things that have changed from the start of millennials to today. But yeah, anyways, I want the audience to kind of get to know you. What are you doing? Are you in college right now?
Yeah, I'm currently enrolled at Southwestern College. It's a junior college in San Diego, California. And I'm playing baseball there. That's one of the main reasons I went to that school. And I'm looking to get a scholarship, go to a 4-year school and play either Division I or Division II baseball.
Awesome. Do you already have any schools in mind?
I have Point Loma Nazarene on the top of my list. I have Chico on the top of my list, and then a few more. I'd love to stay in California. Obviously the weather is hard to beat, and there's some great competition out here, so I'd love to stay here.
Yeah, and my sister goes to Point Loma Nazarene. That's like the campus. You've been to the campus, right? It's gorgeous.
Yeah, we actually played a baseball game there this year against them.
Okay. Yeah.
Just as an exhibition, and it was awesome. The field overlooks the ocean, and it's pretty hard to beat.
Yeah. No, really. And so the baseball season this year, is it going to be around the same time, taking into account coronavirus? I know like soccer for my sister has gotten pushed back from fall. I think it's starting in the spring as well. So sports it's a little interesting right now, but what's the situation with baseball?
So as of now, we are currently slated to start our season April 10th, and we are not allowed to practice or see our coaches or anything until January, I believe, late January. And that's normally when our season starts. I think our first game last year was January 28th. So it'll definitely be a change having our season start 3 months later. And we also started practice last year in August, and starting in August versus January is a huge difference. And so it's very difficult to stay motivated when you have so many months off. I mean, we've been off since March. That's when our season got called. So it's
Mhm.
been definitely a long time, and I'm excited to get back out there, and I'm crossing my fingers that we are going to be able to play.
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely an interesting time to be alive, and then also to be a college student at this time. It must be, or a student in general. I can't imagine going to school, but with Zoom classes.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not actually going to school, and whether that affects mental health or ability to learn. I know for me, sometimes it's like being engaged in a classroom was better than me being at home and learning on my own. At least, it's different for everybody,
It's
but
helpful.
it is. I don't know if that's kinesthetic learning where you're able to like be immersed completely and learn visually and not just through a computer screen. Has it been
Yeah,
tough?
I think the biggest thing is accountability, because it's very difficult when you're sitting right there in front of your teacher to blatantly disrespect them and just go on your phone. It's much harder to do that than to just hold it right under the camera while your teacher's talking and they have no clue what's going on. But that being said, it's also much more difficult to try and talk in the Zoom classes. So you almost feel suppressed as the teachers are talking. And normally I would just raise my hand and have thousands of things to say during class. I'm very talkative, and I find that much more difficult over Zoom.
Right. Because what do you have to wave or
Yeah, I mean
put your hand
you're
up?
waving and trying to unmute yourself and go or like, so it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of times in university, it's about the conversation with the student and the teacher, unless it's just a complete pure lecture, where
Hmm.
they just are teaching a specific thing. But yeah, no, I think it's extremely important for them to engage the teacher, or even for a student to engage another student and have the teacher involved. And I can see how that's just a complete shift. And I wonder what it's going to do. I'm sure we'll look back 10, 20, 30 years from now and be like, that period of time that these kids in whatever grades were experiencing Zoom calls, I think we'll see some drastic changes. I don't know what, maybe positive, maybe negative. I have a feeling
Yeah.
more negative than positive, but yeah, there's definitely going to be some changes, especially for like younger kids, right? I feel like you, as someone who's a critical thinker, and as somebody who understands, has gone through 18 years of school and understands what like normalcy is, it's a little bit easier to kind of navigate that. But for like a kid just going into school, having to wear a mask or having to just do it all through Zoom, I'm sure it's weird. But anyways, I
Yeah.
I want to get back to baseball, because a couple months ago, I think was it in July or June, I think that you put this.
Yeah, I believe it was June.
Okay. So when we were all still trying to figure out, I think it was a couple months into 2 weeks to slow the spread. Um, you had put out um, what would you call it? A research analysis paper of understanding baseball, where it is, hotspots of where the coronavirus was, heat levels of like temperature of different states, and where it might be safe for a baseball team, whether professional or a school, to play. Can you like explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so I called it the MLB return to play proposal, and it was essentially a proposal, and the idea was to get Major League Baseball to look at it.
Mhm.
A little personal story: I am looking to go into sports broadcasting, and so any way I can get into the industry is something that I'm looking to do.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, so baseball's main issues were that they weren't hot about a bubble, because they would keep players away from their family. So that was one main issue with my plan, and I'll get into that in a sec. And then another one was just the travel and how they're going to be able to manage all these players getting tested every day, and the hotels and interactions with people outside of the team. So my plan was essentially to host baseball here in San Diego. There's so many great facilities around the city. You got SDSU, USD, UCSD, even my school, Southwestern, has a top-notch field. And then obviously Petco Park. So my plan was to bring San Diego here. I laid out all the hotels that are close to the fields. I laid out practice fields that are within the vicinities of these main fields. And then I also even set up like a schedule, what opening weekend could look like and where these teams would be playing. And then I laid out the facts of coronavirus statistics in the 3 locations that they were looking at for doing bubbles. They were talking about maybe a California bubble. They were talking about maybe in Arizona, which is Phoenix spring training, and then Florida spring training sites. And I laid out the facts that their coronavirus numbers are much worse than ours. The temperatures in Arizona are just not feasible to play baseball in. I don't know about you, but playing in 103, I think was the average. Sitting in catcher's gear for 9 innings is humanly impossible. And so
right.
I was trying to really point that out. And I think it ended up being an 11-page proposal of just these facts and another alternative for Major League Baseball to look at.
Okay. And what was special about California or Southern California? Is it that like perfect temperature where what we're saying, you know, what Dr. Fauci has said, that sunlight actually is the best place to be without a mask, you know, by yourself or with members of your family, because a virus does not thrive where there is high levels of vitamin D and just like photons in general, the heat levels. So is it just like the perfect temperature for baseball and also taking into account coronavirus and sunlight?
Well, it's certainly ideal for both. I'll tell you what, the sun's pretty much always out here in San Diego. So climate would definitely not be an issue. And there's about 5 or 6 main reasons for the major leagues to come here. And so I laid them all out, and I can actually share that document with you if you'd like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll put that in the link description below, because I read it and I was like, this is very professional, very well done. I shared it on Twitter because I was like, and I shared it with, do you know who Steve Dace is?
I've heard the name.
He's with the Blaze Network. And he just does, like, I love listening to him. He's very conservative, but I enjoy listening to his religious perspectives, his political perspectives. And then he was a head, I think, data analyst for the Ted Cruz campaign. So he just has a very extensive knowledge on politics, but also he, I believe, owns the Michigan football network, like at least broadcasting network or something like that. I don't know specifically, but he's also a big sports guy. So he always has sports segments. And I thought, like, hey, if he could get this out there, a lot of politicians listen to him. It would get out to the, you know, California politicians or the San Diego ones. But we've had a difficult time with our governor, that's for sure. So I don't know if I'm maybe that played a part in it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, certainly. I think one of the hardest parts was to get Governor Newsom on board. Because having all these teams come from out of state, I mean, he's been talking about how we shouldn't be traveling anywhere. We should stay in our places. And so to bring in thousands of people between the staff, the players, and all that stuff, it certainly would have been difficult to get him on board.
Right. And I believe he was not on board until I believe it was Florida said, hey, actually, you know, guys, if your state is locked down, come on over to our state. Almost the next day, Governor Newsom has said, actually, we're going to play. And I think money has a big part to play in that. Professional sports in California brings in a lot of money. And I think that is playing a part definitely in college sports. The Big Ten finally, you know, opening up. Money plays a big part in that. Politics also plays a big part in that. But yeah, it's just interesting to watch.
With the Big Ten, it was interesting to watch it transpire as they were one of the first to say, yeah, we're not going to play. And then all these other littler conferences started going in and they were being successful with it. And they're sitting back like, hey, this could work. And they didn't get blackballed, but they certainly got hammered for their shutdown. And there were calls for the commissioner to resign. And so I think he felt that pressure and realized that, hey, it's not crazy to go and play sports right now. It's really not that crazy.
Right. And if coaches, parents, and players are all on board, for them to just sit back and say, nah, especially when there's high schools that we're playing, there's other colleges in the area that were
Hmm.
playing, it's a kind of a bad look. And I think
Yeah.
optics played a big role in that as well. Like you're saying, calling for uh, the guy to resign and all of that.
Hmm.
It's it's very interesting to watch. It's like this 2020 is definitely the craziest year that I've witnessed in my entire life, or at least, as aware that I am of politics
Hmm.
and everything going on. I think we can all agree it's
That
a
makes two
crazy
of us. Yeah.
but since it is 2020, I want to shift over a little bit, and the reason why I'm having you on is to try and get a Generation Z perspective on millennials and just in general life, and the future, because my podcast is typically I do this specifically towards millennials to try and teach critical thinking, uh, look at life from a millennial perspective. I feel like that I do a good job at critically thinking, taking the news of the day, doing my research into whether it's fact or not, looking at narratives and breaking them down, and I don't feel like that's happening a lot in my generation. So I think first I want to start by asking you, because I mean, we grew up in the same time, and I'm good friends with your brother, and we all hung out. So I don't know if there's really that big of a difference. But from what you are seeing, maybe even talking with your friends and all that, what is the view from Generation Z looking at millennials?
Well, it's interesting. I have a lot of conversations with my friends, and it's not we talk a lot of politics, and there's no hard feelings over it, and we just enjoy the conversation. And I think we're unique in that way. I think a lot of Gen Z people do not want to dig super deep into politics because like you, they view it as dire, and you hear this narrative that it's now or never. This election cycle is going to determine the rest of your life, and I don't think we view it that way.
Mm.
Certainly, it's going to make a big difference, and there's no doubt about that. But it's when you hear all these different narratives being driven at you, and I think a lot of young people eat that stuff up and go with it, certainly. But I'm a little different because like you said, I like to research whether stuff's facts and fiction. I think that's one of the most important things anyone could do is educate themselves on the entire story rather than just getting that one headline that they read. And I think that's something that Generation Z is not great at doing. I think that they listen to what they hear and they just say exactly what they heard. And if you challenge them on that ideal, or you have a conversation with them, you'll find out that their claims are typically fairly empty, and there's not a whole lot of substance behind it, and they're basically puppeting what they hear. And I think it's really important, and something our generation lacks on is doing research, like you said.
Mm. Yeah, one thing you said stuck out to me because as far as like thinking about the future of the decision that's being made, let's say November 3rd, or like this election is the most important election of your entire lifetime. Um, I just had a conversation with a therapist, and I asked her if she notices any differences in her practice between millennials and Generation Z, and she says, I think the difference is, from what I'm seeing, is millennials are a lot more um, anxious about their choices and about, let's say, politics and everything that's the climate that is today, because their prefrontal cortex they're done growing. Their brain is done growing. Their prefrontal cortex is done growing. Whereas she said maybe Generation Z, because the front of their brain is not completely done growing, they don't have the ability to think about the specific actions that are being done right now and how that the butterfly effect of what takes place based on those actions now into the future. And I can totally see that with my sister, for example, making
Mm-hmm.
choices that, like, you look back, you're looking like, why would you make that choice? It's obvious what's going to happen in the future, but she doesn't think of it that way. And I wonder if if that makes any sense, or if that could be a reason.
Yeah, it makes sense. I definitely do. I mean, I try and look at myself 5 years in the future, and it's hard to even see that. And so I can only imagine people trying to look 30 years in the future. And I think that would be a great explanation for that phenomenon, really.
Yeah, yeah. But we do it too much where most people my age, they're, oh my gosh, everything is so political. Everything is so, if you have to do this today because look at the future. We have to, whether it's politics or religion, or how we socially interact with each other, things need to be done now. And, in order to change the future. But I think we look too deep into it without actually, well, how do I say this? Not that we look too deep into like the facts, we look deep into like the possibility of the future based on our actions. But I think that only creates anxiety, because a lot of people my age are very anxious about the way of the world and that it's all crumbling. But I don't think Generation Z does. They're just kind of like, all right. Now headlines are a big thing for everyone. Like everyone just kind of like takes the headlines and runs with it. But I've noticed that millennials are a little bit more politically correct than Generation Z. Do you notice that? Like they're kind of just like, that's so dumb. Why are we getting offended over this?
I completely agree. I think that's the whole cancel culture doesn't stem from our generation. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's totally our generation for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not frustrated with it, but it just kind of, it makes me roll my eyes a little bit. Just some of the things that people are so upset about. I mean, in my view, life is too short to get so upset over such little things. And I think it's really important to just have just to sit back and watch stuff unfold, and then kind of give. I'm trying to think as far as politics go. Give your opinion and disagree with someone and have a good conversation, and there's no issue with that, rather than trying to be right and wrong, because remember, opinions aren't right and wrong. You have an opinion, and sure, it can be changed, and there's facts behind it, but there's facts to back up both sides with a lot of different issues. And that's, I think, where we've drawn away from, is that politics, there are no right and wrong answers. It's rather just opinions and what you believe.
I 100% agree. I told you this, and I keep parroting this on my podcast, but I'm going to keep on doing it. And so it gets into people's heads. The problem with today is I call it the good and evil dichotomy. It's like this: if you're on team virtuous and team good, the opposite side has to be the opposite of that, which is evil, which is not good. And so politics is no longer, or your opinion is no longer your opinion. It falls into the category of right and wrong. And thus good and evil. And so you can't, from that, you cannot create a conversation. You can't debate. You can't find common ground, because there is no common ground between good and evil. If that makes sense.
And definitely. And we were talking about me being in college right now. And one thing I can tell you, another negative about being on Zoom, is my teachers love to talk about the president, and most of the time it's not in a positive light. I can tell you that. I've heard some pretty ugly names being called, and it's rather unfortunate, because I sit here and in class, I would totally just raise my hand and challenge them on these ideals that are completely factless. They just are name calling, and I would raise my hand and I would challenge them on their ideals. But on Zoom, it's much more difficult to cut off their thoughts and speak over them when they're in power and they control your grade. I mean, what is there to gain for you to challenge a teacher when they can just hurt your grade by you doing it? I don't see how calling the president of the United States a pig and the fabricator in chief. I mean, these are things I hear every day, and I don't see how that's going to help me with Communications 200 mass media. I mean, that it sounds like the media, but it's not what mass media is. So I think that's really unfortunate, and a climate that I do not like in the college environment.
Yeah, I think from an outside perspective, the institute, the school, the universities, the institutions that where are for higher learning, seems like a cesspool of just and an echo chamber for just one ideology, and that there is no room for the opposite of that. Because I've even, I mean, you just think of, like, for example, conservative speakers can't go to big colleges to speak to other conservative students for fear of some form of, I mean, protests always would happen, but like even threats on their life, and then schools shutting them down. You typically don't even go to those colleges anymore, the big colleges like a Berkeley, let's say. You
Yeah,
can't
that's
have
what I
like
was
a Ben
thinking.
Shapiro at a Berkeley. That's without him having a whole team of secret
The Secret
police
Service, yeah.
service. So yeah, it's I can see how that's frustrating. Um, but in general, how do you think, because you're going to college, are a lot of your friends also going to college, or is it because my generation, I feel like after going to college, going into a lot of debt, have realized that, oh, actually a lot of what I'm doing has nothing to do with my college degree, and my college degree is somewhat meaningless because I am an entrepreneur, and I took I mean, maybe communication is a good class to take, or even business management or whatever, or a good degree to go into. But a lot of times you find that what you do in life is not necessarily what your degree is in. And I'm wondering if that same sort of sentiment is kind of like trickled down to your generation, or is it just kind of like, I'll go to college.
Well, I think that might be one of the biggest things that separates our generations is I guess, the thoughts on college. And so a lot of people in my generation, they're fed the idea that college is the only way you'll get a job, or the only way you'll be successful here in America, which just flat out isn't true. And most of my friends are going to 4-year universities. I have a couple in community college like me. And then I have a few that are just not even doing college. And there's, like you said, one of them's an entrepreneur. He wants to start his own businesses and stuff like that, which is great. And you don't need a college degree to do that. And I think a lot of people in my generation understand that, and they hear how bad student loans can be and how you can be riddled with it for the rest of your life. And I think it's really important that we understand that, because college isn't for everyone. It's certainly, it can lead you to a pathway that will eventually have you be successful in life. And it's definitely a great thing. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But it's certainly not you must go to college, otherwise you're not going to be successful here. I just don't believe that's true. And I don't think our generation believes that's true. And there's also so many routes. And I think that's the biggest thing, is the stigma of community college going away, and trying to find affordable ways to get your degree while still doing internships and all this other stuff.
Good. Yeah. Cause we kind of learned that a little bit too late, because my parents, good thing is my parents didn't force me into anything, but it was definitely that idea that in order to do something with your life, you got to go to college, get a degree. But I think a lot of people are finding that it doesn't guarantee you a job afterwards. Whereas possibly, in the future or past generations, if you went to school and got a degree, it didn't guarantee you a job, but you had a much higher chance of getting a job in the degree that you got, pretty much. We're going a little longer than I expected, but that's totally okay. I want to get into some like specific things. So let's do like I'm going to ask you, and I want to get a quick answer from each one.
Okay.
On what generation thinks about. Let's see. So I already asked you about college. What about social media? What does your generation think about social media?
We love social media as a generation, I can tell you that. And there's a lot of negative stigmas that I believe come from the millennials, and they're trying to force feed you this idea that it's bad. There's so many bad things, which sure there are, and there's bullying that goes on online and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot of positives that come out of social media. And I think it's important, and there's a lot more of it in today's climate, that just post what is you. Don't try and come up with these pictures that are just not you. It's the whole Instagram versus reality thing. And I think our generation is capturing that and becoming more comfortable with ourselves, even though the climate says otherwise. I think it's something that we're trying to change, and just be yourself. And it's a really great way to stay connected with people and catch up with relatives and stuff like that. And that's the ideal of social media. And I think if we can stay with that and not go into these negative dark holes with it, then it's a great tool.
Okay, awesome. Now, relationships and the idea of marriage.
I mean, it's interesting because I hear a lot of stories about people not getting married for just because they don't want I don't know if it's they don't want the title, or I don't know. That's not a concept that's been around for a ton of years. It's always been, hey, you love each other, you're going to make your vows, and you're going to get married. But we see a very high divorce rate here in the United States. And so I think people are realizing that maybe it's not the best thing that we get married, even though we can love each other and we're meant to be. I think that whole aspect is changing as we speak. And as the years progress, I think we'll see less and less marriages and the traditional way, and just a lot more of people being together and loving each other for who they are, not because a piece of paper says they're together.
Awesome. I like that. Now, at least in my generation, socialism, or the idea of like democratic socialism, is a big thing that we talk about. And the whether it's the destruction or the movement away from capitalism. So capitalism, socialism, is that a conversation that's being had, or is it just like, hey, we like the system that we have, let's continue with it, let's make it better?
I think our generation tends to ignore it all. Other than hearing Bernie Sanders talk about socialism, it's typically not really a topic we even look at. And I think our schools have slightly failed us in a way, because we leave high school, we leave college with lots of fundamental ideas and things that we should know how to do in life that we just don't know, such as taxes and how government makes its money and stuff like that. So I think that maybe installing some of that in education and giving students another life class or something where they learn these basic skills, because not everyone's as fortunate as I am to have two loving parents that will teach me these things that are very difficult to learn on your own. And so so I think that's important for the school systems to maybe implement.
Yeah. Awesome. That's good to hear. We talked a little bit about politics, but social justice. I guess you've already kind of said that it's sort of ignored. The political correctness of the millennial generation is kind of ignored, and it's like, let's just move on with our lives, because it's definitely something that's being pushed by my generation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what, something that personally I don't love is seeing it everywhere I go. And I understand that there are issues and our country's not perfect. And if you look at our country from its founding, we were certainly not perfect. We had slavery and lots of ugly things. And if you even just looking at the 14th Amendment and how far we've come since then, I think it's important to understand that we are not a perfect country, and we will continue to grow. And with a growing country comes its growing pains. Like any person, you grow, you have issues, you have growing pains. And I just think we're at a time where we're hitting another one of those. And it seems to be a massive movement for social justice and racial equality. And I have no issue with the concept of end racism. That doesn't bother me. I think that should be a fundamental principle. And so do I need to see it everywhere I go? Not necessarily. And I want to say one of the things that has stuck with me I heard Morgan Freeman speak. And one of the things that he said was, you want to hear one of the ways to stop racism is stop talking about it. If you create an issue that doesn't exist to the extent that you talk about it, then it's just going to become worse on its own hands. And so I think that's something to think about.
I like that. Okay, cool. Now I got some, so last night I put on Instagram a little question box saying, hey, I'm talking to a Generation Z doing a podcast. You guys have any questions? So I want to, once again, spitfire these questions and just get a quick answer from you. So I'm not going to name the specific names of the people, because some of the Instagrams I don't know. So TikTok. You ever downloaded it?
I downloaded it, had it for 2 days, and got rid of it. I realized that I would spend way too much time on this app.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because TikTok it's addicting, man. It like you can just keep swiping. It's even more addicting than Instagram. But your
Yeah.
generation has like capitalized on TikTok. That's for
Yeah,
damn
I
sure.
mean, it's interesting. Like we were talking about, not any college degree. You see these creators, they're making millions of dollars just making videos online. I mean, that didn't exist 20, 25 years ago. So that just goes back to our previous topic. But I mean, I don't have TikTok, and the only reason I do is because I watch my friends spend hours on the app, and I just don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's probably for the best. And I think
Yeah.
it's being canceled or something like that. I don't know. I don't know the whole
Yeah,
thing.
I hear that Trump is talking about ending communication with TikTok or communications on TikTok as far as Sunday, but then he's going to make a decision on the bid that Oracle made. It's confusing, and I, quite frankly, tuned out to it because I don't use the app.
Okay, yeah, neither do I. All right, so how does social media play into relationships? We've seen within the past couple of years the rise of the rise of dating apps. Does that play a part in relationships? Is Tinder a big thing amongst Generation Z, or are you seeing more spontaneous interactions that an actual like conversating that creates relationships than to move on? It's greater relationships and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Tinder is massive, and in our generation, pretty much everyone has the app, and it's just something that's kind of normal, and you meet new people through it. And one of my cousins is actually getting married in February. They met on a dating app. It's a new climate of dating and relationships that is kind of cool. I mean, you see, it's a completely new way of meeting people, and I think any way you can meet new people and expand your group and who you interact with, I think that's great.
All right. What industry do you think Generation Z will impact the most? Because the first thing that comes to my mind is technology. Do you agree with that, or do you think there's going to be it's just going to be overwhelmingly technology or other industries that are going to be mainly Generation Z influenced?
I think technology, not necessarily the software and the internals of it, but more what goes on these platforms and the jobs that come out of these types of things. I think that you'll find a lot of Generation Z people getting involved in jobs that have to do with technology or becoming a creator or a video editor because the market's just expanding. And I think you're going to see this generation that has been immersed in technology since we were growing up find themselves in jobs that revolve around technology. And I think it's only going to grow and get bigger and bigger even as the next generation moves in.
The last question. Would you describe Generation Z as maybe more desperate for attention than other generations?
I think I would, for sure. I think we crave attention and instant gratification. I think those are the two things that our generation stinks at. Thank you, Amazon, for the instant gratification one. And I think
even Facebook with notifications, every time you go on,
yeah.
you have like all these red dots and notification here, dopamine hit here, dopamine hit here.
Yeah, exactly. And these apps are so, you don't realize it, but these apps have so many different researchers that have looked through how people work and the psychology behind what will make people stay on these apps longer, what will get people to go on these apps more. And we don't realize it when we're doing it, but these apps have it down, and the whole endless scrolling thing and stuff like that. So
they can read our damn minds. They know our brain chemistry better than we do, and we just fall prey to it for sure.
Yeah.
Well, dude, that I really enjoyed this conversation. It's nice to see the differences and the similarities, because I don't think a lot of people, I mean, if you have siblings and you're around my age, it's easy to see. We're still learning a lot about Generation Z. You can look at a bunch of studies on millennials and just understand how we think about religion, whether we're more agnostic or whatever religion, whether we vote more than other generations, how big our population is, all that kind of stuff. We have the data, but we do not yet completely have the data for Generation Z. So I think we're going to learn a lot more. It's going to be interesting to see, like we talked about before, as the prefrontal cortex starts to develop completely within the next couple of years. I think 4 years for like you. Mine just completely developed, apparently.
Good for you.
So it's just gonna be interesting to see what that looks like in the future, and then also just like the climate today, what that's gonna look like, even in 40 days when the election happens. So it's gonna be
daily life. Yeah.
But dude, I appreciate you coming on. Maybe we'll have you on again, just to, from a millennial or from a Generation Z perspective, looking at a specific topic or whatever. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. I had a blast and I'd love to do it again. Always great talking with you.
Sweet. All right, man.